just a brief recap, because about half of you weren't here last week, and we had some last week, or not here this week. We began Daniel. Daniel's kind of like I won't use the term prequel to Revelation, because it was written first. It was like, but it has a lot of stuff that will correspond to Revelation. But last week we went over chapter 1, basically gave the background of Daniel and his friends, and a brief history of the time of Abraham, where we ended off a couple weeks ago in Genesis, up to Daniel, just a summary of the Old Testament. So we summarize about his friend. They're taken to captivity into Judah. And now today we're going to talk about one of the most famous dreams in the Bible, Daniel chapter 2. So Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they've been put to a place of high esteem with the king. And now this is going to come in very convenient for them. I'm going to read the first 3 verses. And in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Anyone ever have some dreams are more powerful than others, and you ever dream it and say, I know there was a lot of stuff going on, I just can't, pull it in. That's kind of what happened here. We also see a parallel in Joseph's day. The Pharaoh was troubled by dreams, and this is what used to bring Joseph up to power. So it's kind of a similar situation here. Here, the king of Babylon, who at that time is probably the most powerful nation in the world, has this dream. He's troubled, and this opens the door for Daniel to make his presence known. So I guess in those days, dreams were big to people. First of all, the Lord was actually speaking through a dream, but people were more superstitious and into that stuff then. So Nebuchadnezzar's greatly troubled, and he wants his dream interpreted. All right, verses 4 through 11. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac. Okay, I believe it's this verse here. I forgot to write it down. All right, anyone know what's the original language of the New Testament, what it was written in?
It's in my notes. Is it Arabic? Arabic or something?
No, the New Testament.
Oh, New Testament.
New Testament was written in Greek. All right, anybody know what the original language of the Old Testament was written in? Hebrew. All right, that's the whole Bible, with the exception of these about 4 chapters in Daniel. Beginning in this chapter here is written in Aramaic. So this is the only section in the Bible that wasn't originally written in Hebrew or Greek. So starting right about, I believe, with this verse. Back in verse 4. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. So that's their answer to this problem. But then he throws a snag into it. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. They answered again and said, Let the king tell his servants a dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, There is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. So, I'm sure in the past, the situation was the king would have a dream, call in his, magicians, astrologers, tell him, and they would tell him what it meant. They could be clueless, but they're like, well, let's just keep him happy. But he's thrown a curve this time, and it does even mention here that the thing has left him. Maybe he's just woke up troubled. He's got all these images, but he can't pull it down. He said, I want you to tell me what this dream means, but I want you to tell me also what the dream was. Can you imagine someone telling you that? I had, for instance, I had a very troubling dream, not last night, this is me, the night before last. If someone come up to me and said, all right, what'd you dream? And then I told them, and then they give me interpretation, I'd be like, okay, maybe. But if someone came up to me and said, Kevin, the Lord said you had a dream that a giant plane crashed right behind the Church of God, exploded, and people were screaming in fire, which is that's what I dreamt the other night, and this is what this dream means. Then I said, okay, well, I believe the Lord spoke to you. So that's what Nebuchadnezzar is saying here. And then, of course, the astrologers are like, this is impossible what you're asking. But basically what he's saying, he said, it's not impossible if you guys are who you say you are. You say you can tell what my dreams mean. Well, just demonstrate it. If you know what they mean, you can also tell me what I dreamed. And they're panicking, and they're saying, no one has ever asked this before. And then the key verse 11, which kind of opens the door, what's going to happen is, again, it says, it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. So they're saying only a God can tell you what you dreamed and what it means. So now the stage is set. The Lord always has one of his people in the right place. He had Joseph in jail waiting when the Pharaoh was there, and now the time came. All right, so verses 12 and 13. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. So Daniel was going to be grouped, even though he wasn't brought before the king. Maybe he wasn't in the top group of men. Nebuchadnezzar meant business. And we read about Old Testament kings in those days, and maybe not even as far back as the Old Testament, even in a few centuries ago, the king said the word, and you're gone. And it looks like here Daniel's not in the inner circle, but he's going to be included, and he will be put to death, along with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So when Daniel gets word of this, we'll see what happens in verse 14. Then Daniel answered with the counsel and wisdom of Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. So they're already going to go out there and kill these men. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the king the thing known to Daniel. This dream must have really troubled Nebuchadnezzar, or he wouldn't have made such a hasty demand. And after all, this is the Lord unfolding the rest of history to him. So it's a major occurrence, this dream. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house, and made the things known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, which are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning the secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So, Daniel, we talked about last week as far as moral examples in the Bible. Daniel was at the top. it seems like his character is almost flawless, from a youth here to an old man in the lion's den. And here's another example. He's about to be put to death. He doesn't panic. He gathers his friends. He said, let's go and take this to the Lord, and then the Lord will answer this prayer and reveal what this dream means. And just another example of the kind of person of Daniel, and even here, he's just a young person. So 19 through 23. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with them. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee, for thou hast not made known unto us the king's matter. Just a great example here, once again, of the person Daniel was. First thing he does, he immediately offers up praise to God, because he knows this can only have come from him. Only the Lord could have revealed it. He listened to some of the quotes he had. It's kind of similar to the song they sing after they were delivered from the Red Sea. It's kind of like a song of praise they're offering up to God. He gives all the glory to God. He states that it's not Nebuchadnezzar who rules the world, but it's the Lord. It says the Lord put him there, and the Lord can take him out of there, which we will see what happens in a few chapters from now. He once again closes with praise and thanking God for giving him this answer. And it's just an example of faith. He's not saying, hopefully this will do the trick and will be released. As far as he's concerned, he knows he's been delivered, because he's known this comes from the Lord, and he will go, even though he's just a young Judean boy, probably still a teenager, standing before the mightiest man on earth. He'll stand in front of him with full confidence and faith, knowing that the Lord has revealed this dream to him. We're going to see this happen, and this unfolds. All right, verses 24 to 30. Or is anyone, just a little tidbit, anyone have using King James Bible, which I've been using this week now? I don't know if you ever know if there's a little thing on here. Every time there's a new paragraph, there's a little insignia here. It looks almost like Elmer Fudd's hat. It's like a little sign. It's like a backwards D colored in. I'm really going off subject here, but I remember in seminary, so in 1611, when they did the King James Version, every time there was a new paragraph, they inserted that little insignia. And when you get to 1 Corinthians, it stops. They quit doing it there, and they never finished doing that 400 years later. So I'll show you all maybe at the end of the lesson. You've probably seen it before in book, the little backwards, and say this is where, because this is how I break down my little points based on paragraphs, because I figure it's a new subject. So the next paragraph is verse 24 through 30. So, picture the wise men. The king is just threatening to chop them up in pieces, unless they tell him the dream and they interpret. It's not like saying, I'm going to chop you up in pieces if you don't finish this project over here, which is something that is going to be hard, but they can do. This is something that's impossible. So they're just waiting to die. Therefore Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went in and said thus unto him, Destroy not the wise men of Babylon, bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers, show unto the king. So Daniel stands before him. The king says, all right, can you interpret this dream for me? And Daniel begins to lay down, how impossible this demand is. He's saying the wise men can't do it, the astrologers can't do it, the magicians can't do it, the soothsayers can't do it. But then Daniel, who's the door of opportunity and for the God of heaven to be glorified, he said, but there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of the head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, which should come to pass hereafter, and he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, the secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have, more than any living, but for their sakes, that they shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Once again, such an example of the person Daniel was. As we go cover this paragraph again, first of all, to the great relief of the wise men, I'm sure, or maybe even they said, I don't know if this guy can say what he does, but at least we've got hope now. Maybe he can bail us out from this ridiculous decree. Said, and he had made included, I'm sure Daniel was included of those who was going to be executed. He's brought before the king. The king is intrigued, but I'm sure he probably looks down with him maybe with a hope his dream can be made, but probably a little bit of skepticism. And immediately Daniel says, your wise men couldn't do it, only God can do it, and God has revealed it to me. Daniel, in full humility, is giving God all the glory. So, Nebuchadnezzar's sitting down on the throne and probably thinking, I don't know, this young man knows what he's talking about, but this dream has been troubling me, and I want the interpretation, so let's hear what he's got to say. So maybe only a dramatic incident like this could have even opened the door for Daniel to come in, and that's how the Lord works. So he's about to tell him what happens. All right, now I'm going to get to see how poor my drawing skills are. I used to like to draw when I was younger. I'm going to try to make an image here of this dream. So beginning in verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image, and upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken in pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. I'm going to try to draw, basically, every image I've seen drawn of this has basically the same thing. It has the head, usually some kind of head covering. This is the king. Let's do two arms here. Charles, did you bring those gold and silver markers?
Not my job.
No. They probably should. All right, so it's kind of a massive thing. There's the hand. Not wearing a dress. That's the battle of the day.
Wow.
Pretty good for a cook.
Damn. I'm impressed.
Told you I used to draw when I was. All right. Maybe those legs are a little bit bigger than the arm, a little disproportionate. Okay, so let's go over
You might have fluid.
that. He's been eating the king's diet, and maybe he's been eating some bad food. All right.
What's in his feet?
So imagine, as maybe just picture Nebuchadnezzar sitting there, and maybe like I said, with a look of skepticism, and Daniel starts to describe his dream. And immediately I imagine he's just going, wow, I don't believe this guy's actually telling me this person, what he's saying is genuine. All right. So, the first one, we'll go over one by one, all right? So, the head is going to represent an empire. The arms, thighs, legs, and 10 toes will represent 10 kingdoms. All right, beginning with verse 36. This is a dream, and we will tell interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. So, the head of gold, that's Nebuchadnezzar, that's Babylon, which is in charge right now. This is 500s BC, all right? A couple weeks back in Genesis, we did the Tower of Babel. Babel occurred in that Iraq region, so this is where the term Babylon comes from that region. So one of the Babylon and probably Egypt are probably the two oldest civilizations on earth. Okay, verse 38. He goes on talking about his position. Thou, king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. So even though he's a tyrant, the Lord has put him in that place at that time. So maybe saw, even though he's a powerful, brutal king, maybe the Lord saw in his heart that when given the evidence, he would glorify the God of heaven. And whithersoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So, that's the first part of the statue. And this is Babylon, and it says they will reign for another 66 years from this point. Next, verses 36 or 39. And after thee shall arise a kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. All right, next came two arms, the Medes, over here, and the Persians. This is what we'll talk about in 2 or 3 weeks when Belshazzar, or Daniel, I get them mixed up because they're almost the same name. Daniel's Hebrew name is Belteshazzar. So this is Belshazzar then was the king. I believe it's Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. When the writing of the wall came, they were invaded by the Medes and the Persians. They have such rulers as Cyrus, who gave and Darius. Darius was the one who reluctantly sent Daniel to the lion's den. Cyrus was the one who sent the decree for all the Jews in captivity to go back and rebuild the city. So that came from the Medes and Persians, and the two arms are represented there. Next came in that same chapter another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. So this is Greece. Shall rule over. Anyone heard of Alexander the Great, one of the greatest rulers in history? He came during this time period. We'll talk about it's actually written about in the Bible, and this is a couple hundred years before he's born. So we'll just put in there Alexander. Another tidbit of history. If you're a good Church of God boy like me, you didn't play devil cards. Devil cards were not allowed in the house, but the 4 kings in there is supposedly after King David, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Charlemagne, who lived about 1,000 years ago or something like that. So King Alexander the Great was also made it to the devil cards. Then continue reading verse 40 through 43. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest, okay, we'll stop there for a second, verse 40. All right, anyone know this last one is here? Iron.
Rome.
Okay, Rome, right. Iron, strong. All right. Thankfully, we live in the United States of America, still maybe the greatest nation on earth. The question is it the greatest nation in the history of the earth? I believe it was, but if there's a second, it would be Rome. Even though they came into power, let's see, what was my time? Babylon was about 66 years. The Medes and the Persians, it says, was 208 years. Time-wise, this is from Daniel's dream, so this has another 66 years. 208 years for this kingdom. This is also during Queen Esther, and her incident occurred during this time period. Then Greece. The story was, I forgot how old Alexander the Great, early 30s, he conquered the world, and they said he just got on his throne and just started bawling and crying because there was nothing else left to conquer after that. He didn't live much longer after that either. Then Rome begins a reign of over 500 plus years. They're in charge when Jesus is here on the earth, and I'm sure the Lord did that for a reason. It was really like the pavement of the modern era, covering the earth. Like I said, all roads leading to Rome. I imagine it was just, they began to conquer the globe, and there was nothing like the Roman Empire. A lot of our stuff are named after cities of ancient Rome today. And like I said, was there any kingdom like this other than the United States, which is not a kingdom now, as we know, but there's nothing compared to them. They would dominate the world like no other. And here's the thing, Daniel's saying this in about, 550 BC. They don't really come to power to about the 100s BC, and many liberal scholars say, well, Daniel didn't write that. It was written centuries later, and the only reason they say it, because it's so accurate. They're like saying there's no way he could have known this millennial nation was coming, but we know we have a God that sees all the past, present, and future, so it's no problem for him to reveal it. But there's still more to come with this statue. Verse 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So we have two totally different substances here. So these are like a mixture here. So iron's pretty strong. Clay's not as strong. So it's kind of a contrasting thing, two things that don't really mix together. Now what do these 10 toes represent? All right, 2 arms represented the Medes and Persians. Now some I've heard say that the Roman Empire was broken up east and west. That's a possible interpretation. And then 5 kingdoms from each of them. However, also, let's go back to our Revelation class. There was a lot of things with the dragon with 10 horns and 10 kings that were given power for a short time. These verses kind of go together. We're going to come back to this later in this chapter that talks about this. So this might be Daniel saying, talking about the future kingdom that will reign during the Antichrist. If that's the case, he's given the prophetic time plot from the point of this dream to the end, okay, and to then what happens next. Verse 44. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof is sure. I just love that amount of faith. Basically, Daniel saying, and what I've just told you, you can take to the bank. It's going to happen. So one more illustration here. You get our high-tech video. So just imagine, so they're saying, and we've read about a gigantic rock, it's cut out without hands. It comes down and smashes the image to pieces. So what's this symbolic of? Stone cut out with hands, that's God, God's kingdom. This is man's kingdoms here. And even though he raises him up for his purpose, when his time comes, he will completely destroy or put to end all of man's kingdoms and set up his kingdom on earth. So this is a prophetic look into the kingdom that will come. So there's the stone, and this is the kingdom of God. All right. So once again, picture Nebuchadnezzar there. He's sitting there. He's listening to this, and maybe this took Daniel a few minutes to interpret it. He's basically told him, your kingdom someday is going to be destroyed, which is quite a bold statement. And finally, so he gets a dream, and then it says, what is interesting to see, what is the reaction of Nebuchadnezzar? Verse 46 through 49. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So Daniel's right there next to him. Nebuchadnezzar hears this, and he's just in awe, blown away, and realizes himself, who only but God could have revealed that. And this person, if he's so close to him, where God will speak to him like that, I want him as my right-hand man. This long chapter comes to a close, and look what happens. Nebuchadnezzar, he stood in amazement. He exalts the God of heaven, so he's serving the Lord. This opens the door for Daniel to be put in a place of high authority, which I'm sure he was for many years as long as Nebuchadnezzar reigned, as well as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I wonder whatever happened to them. Maybe we'll find out about that next week. And this truly closes out one of the most prophetic dreams of all the Bible. Basically unfolds the next 2,500 years of history, and all because of this interpretation of Daniel. So this kind of sets the stage now. The first chapter showing where he came from, and now chapter 2 shows his rise to power. And that kind of closes out chapter 2. Anyone have any comments or questions about this for future reference? These figures are going to come up again in this book, so we'll try to connect them and see what happens.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing the connection between the Pharaoh and Nebuchadnezzar, and raising both Joseph to power, and also
Daniel, yeah.
Daniel.
There's kind of two of my favorite Bible characters. It's both almost the same story. Joseph's taken away to a foreign land.
Yeah.
Egypt's probably the most powerful nation in the world. He has a dream.
A lot of parallels.
Joseph, yeah.
A lot of parallels.
But same thing here. Daniel's taken away to another land. Young person. King has a dream brought before him. And both instances, the Lord uses that to put them in place. Dream. Now we know we have like the Spirit of God, which can come in all believers. But in those days, the Old Testament, it wasn't all access, and it would move on prophets and such. So the Lord had to use what means possible.
And especially in times of trouble, the Lord is with you, and He was with Paul also also when he was in prison, and he also softened jail keepers'
Yeah.
hearts, and there's several times in the Bible.
I think the example is given, if you're faithful, the Lord
Right.
is gonna make a way for doing that.
Exactly.
Do you think the king actually forgot what he had dreamt, or was he using it?
Well, there was one verse that makes it sound like, let me see if I can find,
I mean, I can understand that, I'll forget.
I know, so, I think it's verse 9, but if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is one decree for you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and that's not that one. Oh, here's verse 8. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me. So that makes it sound like perhaps he's forgot. I imagine what it is, he's woke up troubled, and he's like, what was that I dreamed last night? And I'm sure as soon as Daniel started saying that, he goes, that's it, that's what I dreamt. And this, I mean, that's that good statue. How many times have we seen that image? And next chapter, there's going to be a statue, and perhaps this dream has gone to Nebuchadnezzar's head at first. Though, even though he is recognized as God of heaven, he's still a tyrant king, and he's still a flawed human. And what we've seen here is two classic examples. Maybe I'll share that next week, but some people can handle blessings and prosperity. Some people cannot. Daniel was a person who could handle it. Even though he went from, just slave child to next to the king, he remained as humble and as spiritual as ever. So, just a good example, Daniel. All right, we'll close in prayer. Lord, thank you for this lesson today, the lessons of your word, and continue to bless us. May we be spiritual examples for you like Daniel, the prophet, was. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen.